I'm Bella Mackie, and this is my book, Jog On, How Running Saved My Life, which, if the title didn't tell you already, is about how running saved my life. It's a look at mental health problems and the things we do to try and make them better. In my case, it was anxiety, depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and a life lived in those margins, with nothing really making it feel better until one day when, in a very low period, I picked up some trainers and, on a whim, went for a 3-minute run, which began a kind of 5-year love affair with running. And I hope the book can show you how running might be able to help you out of some really low points too. So I'm here at my local Islington Waterstones, and I'm here looking at some of the books that inspired me when I was writing Jog On. So the first one is Scott Stossel, My Age of Anxiety, which is a big weighty tome about Scott's, who is a journalist like me, his battle with very, very severe anxiety. And for me, this was the first kind of personal memoir I'd read about anxiety, as opposed to a kind of self-help book or a professional book. And Scott suffered with really, really incredibly, intense and severe anxiety. Even on his wedding day, sort of being sick and, visiting hundreds of different experts and professionals trying to figure out what was wrong with him. But it's not just a book about Scott, because I've never read a book about anxiety that goes into the history of it and the kind of philosophy behind it so intricately. The man has really done his research on anxiety. There's quotes from philosophers and big thinkers and scientists and, his mother. He covers kind of everything, A to Z, on the spectrum of anxiety, which, if you suffer from it, is a really interesting thing. And he's dug up all these amazing quotes, which I looked at and took quite a few from my book. Fear sharpens the senses, anxiety paralyzes them. Kurt Goldstein, and A Holistic Approach to Biology in 1939. So this guy, Scott, has just written the kind of definitive anxiety book. So if you are suffering, I would give this a go, because it's sort of terrifying and funny in equal measure. So now I'm downstairs in the fiction section, and I'm just going to show you my second book, which is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's kind of big. And Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen has been a book that's stuck with me my whole life, mainly because I think Austen writes women characters so well, and that's rare even now. But also because Jane Austen talks about exercise in Pride and Prejudice. And I always thought that was quite rare for that generation to kind of espouse exercise for women especially. So there's a famous part in Pride and Prejudice where Elizabeth's sister, Jane, is ill, and Elizabeth decides that she will walk across the country to go and be with her. So in Meryton they parted, the two youngest repaired to the lodgings of one of the officers' wives, and Elizabeth continued her walk alone, crossing field after field at a quick pace, jumping over stiles and springing over puddles with impatient activity, and finding herself at last within view of the house, with weary ankles, dirty stockings, and a face glowing with the warmth of exercise. And that always stuck with me, because I thought, actually that's kind of amazing, a woman being independent and doing sort of an activity on her own, even back then, and it being really frowned upon. And then later on in the book there's a famous sentence where Mr. Darcy says that he thinks that her fine eyes were rather brightened by the exercise. So obviously it didn't hurt Elizabeth, but it's a wonderful book, and it's very interesting on independent, strong women, which gave me a boost while I was writing. So my third book is a bit different. It's not about anxiety, and it's not about exercise. It's a book called Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan. This book stuck with me all year. It's an incredible, incredible book. It's about a girl called Anna Kerrigan, whose father disappears during the Second World War. And the reason I think this book is so inspiring and sort of fascinating and interesting, and the reason why it stuck with me, is because Anna, during the Second World War, becomes a diver, which is just incredibly rare for women. And Jennifer Egan has written this incredibly complex portrait of a woman growing up in a time where, it was very hard to be a woman, a time that I can't imagine. And again, this woman, with very little resources and not really any family support, decides that she's going to be a Navy diver. And that, I just thought, I was writing a book about running, which is completely different, but there is something amazing about, a character in a book who's doing something sort of really bolshy and sort of daring. And this book, without giving too much away, she has lots of trials and tribulations, but it really kind of made me think, okay, well, if someone can go Navy diving, I can write a book about running.